So I want to go over and remind you of the things that you need to do for your grid project, which is this skull that has a grid laid over it. All right. Most of us have already created our 1 by 1 inch grid. If you haven't, you need to follow the directions under number 1, which tell you how to draw your 1 by 1 inch grid. And when you're finished, it should look like this, so that you've drawn your lines lightly so that they're easy to erase, something which you'll have to do at the very end, and you've labeled it. So A through I at the top and bottom lines, and then 1 through 12 coming down the columns. All right. Most of us have completed that task and are ready to be moving on to the actual drawing itself. Remember, as we do this, we want to break down our squares so that we have better placement, so that we can see where we're putting our lines and our shapes. The replicated lines and shapes, they should be the same as in the small square leading into the big square, okay? You won't erase the grid until you are completely finished with your project, all right? So you should have already gotten your 1 by 1 inch grid done. You should have it labeled, and now you should be focusing on your project. I want you to focus on only one square at a time, okay? It's easier if you start off working from the top left down to the bottom right if you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, it's easier to start from the top right to the top or bottom left. And that's just so you're not wiping your hand back and forth. If your hand gets wiped and back and forth a lot, it's going to make the graphite smudge. So you're going to slowly build up your picture and focus on each square at a time. All right. And as you're doing that, break down your square into fourths to help find the placement and make sure each square is correct before moving on. So here I've got a partially finished skull on the grid. You can see the grid's drawn very lightly, and now I've started to add in some of the darker lines, okay, and I've got a bunch of different things. And here is the skull I'm working from. It's a little different from yours, but the general idea is still the same, okay? So we want to be working on another square, okay? So I'm going to keep working on this square right here that I'm in the middle of. You can see I've kind of started it, I'm kind of working on it, and I want to continue working on that. And this is also a good process because you're going to have to draw a couple of stars on your project even though they are in different spots, okay? You can see right here I'm going to have to draw a star, and I've started out with where my placement's going to be. So if you want to, you can make sure that you're breaking down and looking only at the section you're trying to draw. We do this so that our brain can focus on the one thing that's in front of us and not on multiple things at once. Your brain, that left brain, really likes to focus on a lot of different things at the same time. It likes to see what's going on, and it likes to see the whole picture. It just does. So we want to try to avoid that. So as we're looking at our little square, notice that's all we're looking at doing right there, is that. Okay. So I'm going to put this off to the side so you can see me draw. And I've already created some of the grid lines that I'm going to use on this. As you can see, I've already created it to show you where middle is. So I've shown halfway vertically and halfway horizontally. And you can see this star that we're going to draw starts right at the middle line of this skull, right? It starts right in the middle, and that's where we need to focus on. So as you can see, we're going to have a star. Now I just suggest that you draw a 5-point star to help this make it easier. If you've ever drawn a 5-point star, I think you have, but if you haven't, you just start on one edge, draw a triangle, and then continue and never lift up your pencil. Now that's a very goofy looking 5-point star, but you can create the same effect going a little slower, right? We've got that triangle. You can see I've already put in the triangle. You'll notice I've measured up where half is on either side, and then that is where I've got my point for the top of the star. As I look, I know I'm going to be able to see that I've got a whole section right here of where this has got to come and create the rest of that star. I got to come from here and end over there. And as I look at this, I'll show you on this, you'll notice that the point of this comes down and hits the side of my star. Notice that it hasn't touched that point yet from this to this. So I know I'm going to have to go a little bit farther down than there where this shows me. Alright, so when I draw these lines, I want to make sure I'm paying close attention to how they're doing. I'm drawing lighter. Alright. You want to make sure your lines are straight. You can use a ruler if you need help in creating a straight line. Measure your distance here. Really look at the distance from this point to the edge of your square that you've drawn. Okay. Notice how far over it goes. Really pay attention to that information. So you're going to get your 5-point star drawn in here. Now I think that looks a little wider than it should, right? But I can always go back through and keep working on it and erase. Find out where it really needs to be. And then draw those lines in again. The nice thing with a 5-point star is you can always go in and lightly erase those other sections that you don't need. Then really focus on the outline shape of your star. That way you're getting the lines you need, but not using the lines that you don't need, right? So you can see you'd keep working on that star to get it in its place. Of course, you don't have a star right there, but you might in another spot. You'll have stars down here on the cheeks. Now I want to show you one other thing to pay attention to. As you look at the scallops inside the eye, this is one area I noticed that the left brain really wants to take over. You can see these scallops going all the way through. Take some time to look in there and say, oh, I'm working in square B5. Right? That's where I was. I was in B5. And you'll notice that I need to, in B5, have one full one, a part of another one, and barely the starting of another one. So if I were to bring over B5, you can see I've got my full one, I've got part of one, and if this line were to come across, you can see I just barely started that one. As I move down into B6, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I should be able to see. 3 really well, and 2 just kind of. So here's the one that's kind of shown. 1, 2, 3, seen fully, and then kind of seeing part of that one. So make sure you're looking where things go and planning out where they are. Here down at the bottom of the jaw, this is now square C11. So if I look at C11, I can see it's just a little bit of this line right here that I've got to make sure that gets in. If I break this in half, right, because we break things in half, notice right at the halfway point is where that skull touches. And if I do it up here, you'll notice it's kind of in the middle of this thicker line is where the middle is. So then I can go here and find where my halves are. You would need to measure those out, all right? I'm not going to draw the half over here because nothing's drawn over there, but I know that the line comes down right here and continues in the same direction. Lightly get that line put in and get more of this skull's jaw drawn in here. All right, we know the line's a little thicker. Don't want to draw just simple thin lines because you will have to make these a little bit thicker. Now if we look back at square C11, you'll notice there's a little bit hanging off on our skull right there. There's a little bit kind of going on, right? At this point, I might not focus a ton on it because I know that something's going to get drawn there, so I'll lightly kind of draw that rounded shape, making sure I leave some of the white space in there, but I leave it pretty white or light. I don't focus too much on making it dark because I want to be able to go back and make sure that it's going to be what it needs to be and in the right spot. So I kind of lightly put that in there. I can focus it up and make it more intense later when I know exactly what needs to be happening in the square above it, which is right there. So you could continue that, and you'd know you'd need to look and notice where everything's going. Okay? So on this, you really need to just be looking back and forth from the source material, which is the skull with the smaller grid, and then moving into the larger grid that has the 1 by 1 inch squares. All right? So just always return to the source material. Always make sure that you're focused on one square. Don't try to overthink. Remember, if you overthink, sometimes you don't put things in the squares they belong, and then things look weird, and you don't want that, okay? This is a technical skill practice that I think you can all do as long as you're focusing on the squares at a time and breaking them down to where they need to be.